This is the story of the olden world. When the olden world was here, before long ago, before the days of old, before the flood, before the great asteroid, before the fire. Long, many years ago, in the beginnings of all, at the start. In those days, everything was different. Nothing is the same. This is the story that will shock you, that will excite you, that will enlighten you. Michael walked over the command station. He had been thinking deeply. His mind was not where it should be. He wanted to be somewhere else today. Recently, Michael had found an awesome asteroid field in the regions around the outermost planet, Saturn. He had found one asteroid almost the size of a small moon. The surface was fascinating. There were things growing there Michael had never seen. It was a special place for him, so peaceful. The big rock was like a floating beach. The trees there were all fibrous like plants. They had no trunks large enough to be called trees, but they still grew very tall and even had fruit on them. Michael liked the fruit. It was like a banana. There were also some that tasted like tomatoes. They were all large and blue. Michael had built a small abode, a cabin. He had brought chairs and other furnitures onto the asteroid. The asteroid was just so great. It was a place that he could go to think. Here, there were no other people around, and the view was awesome. Michael remembered his days back on Earth in the olden days, before the time of now, before the great flood destroyed the beautiful connection, before the wisdom of the ancient ones was lost, and the trees grew strong and mighty, clear unto the great gods of heaven. Those were the days. Those were the days to be longed for, when all the world knew the truth and everyone was safe. Well, from the porch of Michael's cabin, you could see Saturn's glowing brilliantly. As a beautiful yellow lamp backdropped by fabulous blue sky, the asteroid had sufficient amounts of atmosphere to make the place beautiful. And the yellow Saturn was set against that blue sky, and it was tremendous. Saturn had multicolored rings like a rainbow around it. In the distance, you could see the many moons quite well. One of the moons appeared to be green, and that's where the command station was. That's where Michael spent much of his time. At night, far off into the distance, he could see the Earth. But now it was no longer the olden days. Well, the Earth was very small, and it shone like a star, but this planet was very important to Michael. That is, where beautiful Eve had gone. She was the daughter of a member of the council, and Eve was specifically assigned and given this permission by a member of the gods of the intergalactic nebula. No one knew why she had gone there. Not even Michael really knew. She had gone there at some point on a passing interplanetary ship. She had liked it so much she decided to stay, and no one knew what to do. She was a fascinating woman. No other woman equaled her in beauty. The planet Earth was not populated with any humanoids at all. It was completely overgrown with jungle and tropical regions, and the creatures there were huge. Eve wasn't alone. Her father had sent with her others to help her scout out the world and explore the region. It was all fine with Michael, but it just didn't make sense to him. She could have anything she wanted in that quadrant. She was so beautiful, and she could have any man, too. But she chose to explore this far-off, uninhabited world. As time went on, it was rumored that her father had become troubled by Princess Eve's long stay. The planet had never been explored properly, and the creatures were noted to be very large and strange. There wasn't enough knowledge about this planet. So he sent word to the command station on Saturn. He needed a team to go to Earth and plant a beautiful garden. It was upon these things that Michael wondered, what a fantastic plan, he thought. It would be very exciting to explore this far-off world. But why hadn't Eve responded to his messages? Eve and Michael had been best friends since they were young children. Her father was a member of the Draco Council. Michael's father was also a member of the council. But Michael had followed Eve to this newly explored system for many reasons. There were great adventures to be had in exploration of this new sun system. And Michael loved adventure. Also, it would be a great education. But Michael followed Eve for really only one reason. He loved her. He would have followed her anywhere. He loved her more than all things. Also, her father was an extraordinary member of the council. What an honor to be assisting him. But Eve was acting very strange. It was very odd indeed. She had always been so fun and full of joy. Eve was the happiest girl Michael had ever known. Michael truly loved her. There had never been a love as these two, and all they knew was this love. And everyone knew it. This is why it was so strange to Michael. She knew that he had been placed on the command station and could not get away to such a faraway place as this. Not often. Oh, how Michael missed Eve, but in many ways, it was typical. Eve was often quite adventurous, and many times she had let her curiosity lead her into very odd places. It was just that. This was such a bad time for Michael. He had left his home, his father, his mother, his old life, and he had traveled so very far through the galaxy to be here, to be with her, and with her he knew he belonged. Not only this, it was also curious why Kron was now even allowing her to be there, alone, and without so many of the normal precautions. Why was Kron even entertaining this strange obsession of Eve's? And why had Kron now decided to plant the garden? Why also had Kron, a member of the Supreme Council of the Intergalactic Nebula, why had he brought them all here in the first place, to this little sun system around this beautiful, beautiful planet? Michael had seen these things before, other times when Kron and the galactic gods had devised plans such as this. There was always a higher purpose. Just before the transfer into the system, Kron had met with some very strange and high personages neither Michael or Eve had ever seen before. The intergalactic father, no one had any knowledge of him, and it was told that no one could see him and live. So the absolute God of the intergalactic nebula always sent his representative Kron. Kron was a seraphic messenger of galactic father. He was the seraphic angelic being. Kron ruled over a huge cluster of great star systems, the Draco Quadrant. Kron had 12 children, and each one ruled over the 12 sectors of the quadrant. Kron also had many other children, and one of his children was Samael, the ruler of the constellation Draco. Samael was the chief messenger of the Supreme High Council of the Intergalactic Nebula. He was one of the two awesome beings, the anointed cherubim, or the protectors of the evolutionary process of the quadrant. They were in position right under Kron, and the other cherubic overlord was Michael. Samael's job was very important. He was to guard and protect the human evolutionary process. In the evolutionary process of humans, most everything was very natural and easily controlled by the watchers. However, within the human was a very delicate part of the soul, as in many star systems throughout the galaxy. This process went on constantly. It was very important for the cherubic messenger of the Supreme Council to guide and guard this inner soul, so that it was ensured that all of the children of the Galactic Father would arrive safely home on the evolutionary process. Very important indeed. The most delicate of jobs. The position of cherubic modulator was the most important job in the entire quadrant. And to this position, great care was given for the selection of the office. It was imperative that the cherubic commander be trustworthy and the most wise of all the children of the Galactic Father. There had been only once in millions of years that a mistake had been made in the choosing of the office holders. So all the humanoids within the whole quadrant were all Kron's direct descendants. They were not immortal like the gods. There were also 7 other children of Kron in high authority. They were each assigned an outpost here in this sun system. There was Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Lilith, Venus, Mercury, and Solar. There had been a meeting within the Supreme Council. The meeting was held on Draco, at the capital city of the quadrant, the great assembly place of the gods, great city of Zion. There Samael had been chosen by the entire council by unanimous decision. At the great assembly, 2 new cherubs had been appointed. Samael and Michael, both of their characters were impeccable, irreprehensible, and without any moral stain. At the council meeting, the Galactic Father stood up and asked the 2 what their plan was for bringing all his children home. Samael rose and assumed the platform. He addressed the council and offered these words. Fellow members in the council, gods, brothers, may our Galactic Father live forever. May all our brothers and sisters all survive and come safely home in this evolutionary process. I will go down there and I will make sure each of our Father's children, our brothers and sisters, all arrive home. I will see to it personally. Have no fear, fellow council members. The assembly shouted with applause. It seemed a sincere and great plan. Next, they would hear from Michael. Brother Michael took the podium. He stood quiet for a moment as he looked up upon the messengers and watchers of the council. Then he said, brothers and sisters, fellow members of the Elohim Council, Brother Samael's plan is not correct. Man must remain a free moral agent. The soul is delicate, and I have great faith in our brothers and sisters. It is my plan to guide man with love. I will let man choose for themselves. They have free will. Let each person follow the love within their own hearts. This is the only way for all men to be safely brought home to our great Father. May it be so, and may it be done this way. The assembly was quiet for a moment. Many were pondering the words of Michael. Then, as if unexpectedly, Father Kron took the stand. His presence was awesome. Kron had white hair, very long, and a great white beard. Around his body was an aura of emerald green, and on his head was a rainbow halo. His appearance was as if one looked into the eyes of love itself. The messenger seemed perplexed. Which plan was correct? Should this delicate job of guarding all men back home be left up to free will? What would our Father Kron have to say? Kron's voice then came, I will choose the latter, and may it be so. Well, Samuel's countenance fell. His pride was given a blow. Michael's plan was love, and Samael would have to follow the plan faithfully. He could not deviate. Michael was startled now by someone approaching. This brought him up from his thoughts. Michael, my son, hail! It was Kron. Father, what are you doing here on the command station? I thought you went home. I was, my son, said Kron. I have rushed out to you here because I need to see you. I have come to speak to you of a great mission. The council has met and we have prepared a great task for you. You, my son, were chosen. You must listen to all that I shall tell you, though you will soon not be allowed to take with you the knowledge that I am about to give you on this mission. What are you talking about, Father? What mission, and how can I not take the knowledge with me? My son, the planet Earth has been chosen for the next evolutionary project of the Intergalactic Council. It is a great honor, my son, you have been chosen. You will go there and welcome many great entities, and you will be joined also by others you have known for so long. It is a great work that lies ahead, my son. But Father, what about Eve? We were to marry. I cannot leave her, Father. Michael, my son, you cannot ever be separated from this one. She will always be with you. As you know, she's already upon the earth. She is waiting for you. Father, this is all very amazing. How will this all happen? Michael, my son, all will be revealed to thee as you need to know. I need you to leave today. On the way, you must make a stop on the Jupiter station. Samael has gone there to see his sister Lilith. He has asked me to tell you to stop there on your way to Earth. There is one thing I must tell you now, and this is the one thing alone. Never leave Eve. She is the womb for the new world to come. Guard her with your life always, and love her as thyself. Trust that I am always watching over you, and try to remember that love is the final goal and the imminent need for all the universe of reality. Now, my son, let me hold you for the last time. I will not see you for a long time, my son. I love you so very much. I am also so very proud of you. Remember that I have told thee, I have great faith in thee. The council has chosen you, my son. Fare thee well. Michael arrived on a large moon of Jupiter's planet the next morning. Jupiter was a very wonderful planet. Jupiter appeared orange as one looked from space. The surface, though, was uninhabitable, and there were still volcanic mountains thousands of feet high. The surface of Jupiter had gaseous clouds circling like a whirlwind. In some respects, the planet was similar to the sun itself and provided a source of heat for the many moons that circled it, just as the sun does for the inner planets. However, out of the 28 moons that surrounds Jupiter, there were many of them that did not have inhabitants. As Michael stepped out of the ship, he could see Lilith approaching him. She was a very beautiful woman, a commander of the Jupiter station, sister of Samael, the supreme commander of Draco, and cherub overlord. She was stunning in her beauty. Her hair was black, her eyes as black as coal. She had great wings and a tail like a panther. Lilith approached Michael from a distance. She was riding a reptilian creature native to this Jupiter moon. Adam had heard of her recent adventures here. She was a very gregarious person. She loved to flirt with men. Understandably, it was hard for her. Out here all alone, there were others that came from time to time. Her brother Samael would visit her often. He loved his sister. As everyone knew, the two of them seemed to have a very deep trust, and their ambitions were equal to their imaginations. Everyone knew that their loyalty was absolute. As Lilith got close enough to Michael to be heard, she called out, "Welcome, Michael. I am glad to see you." "Hello," Michael replied. "You ride that creature well." "Thank you," Lilith returned. "I should by now. It is the best way to get around on this little moon of mine. And I have been riding this beast for some time." Lilith pulled on the reins of the creature's mouth and screamed, "Stop! The beast shoved its front feet out in front of the path and made an abrupt skid right in front of Michael. Lilith jumped off the creature as quickly as she came to a rest and threw her arms around Michael, hugging him lovingly. "It is so good to see you, Michael. You have not changed at all." "Where is Samael, Lilith? I was told he wanted to speak with me before I go to my mission on Earth." "Yes," Lilith said abruptly. "I know of this mission. I really need to speak to you of this mission. But Samael is not here. He's on Draco, I suspect. It has been very lonely here, Michael. I am very glad to see you." "He isn't here," Michael said. "But Father Kron told me I was to speak with him. I have taken a considerable detour just to do that. It is strange that he is not here." "Oh well," said Lilith. "I think it is fate. Stay here with me and rest up before you journey onward, my friend. Now come, let us get you something to eat. We must talk." Lilith's home was like a castle. It was huge and made of rock. The entrance was over a bridge that crossed a river, and the river was full of very strange and awful animals Michael had never seen. One thing was for sure. These creatures were not pets. They had teeth like alligators. They were in some ways similar to alligators. They had feet that could run very quickly, and they had horns on their heads. Lilith spoke as she passed the creatures. "Pay no mind to the monsters below. They're only there to look upon." They were in some ways similar to an alligator, but they had feet that could run very quickly and horns on their heads. Lilith spoke as she passed the creatures. "Pay no mind to the monsters below. They are only to look upon. They cannot climb out of the river." As Michael went in to the first room, he felt more comfortable. Lilith may be a strong woman, and her planet certainly dark and gothic, but her living room was only comfort everywhere. The furniture was made from very beautiful wood. The entire place was full of candles and pillows and soft materials that were covering all the chairs, and there were huge fireplaces and a beautiful divan. The divan was made of some kind of fur. In front of the fireplace was a carpet, also made from some kind of very soft fur. "Sit down, Michael. Let me get you something to drink." Lilith left Michael there on the divan for a moment and returned very quickly with some kind of red drink in a crystal goblet. "Here, Michael, drink this. You must be very tired." Michael was tired. The trip had been long, and he had been working so much on the Saturn station. Probably he hadn't yet caught up on his sleep. The drink tasted like wine, made from some kind of berry, very sweet and smooth. It was good. He drank it down quickly. "Thank you, Lilith. That was what I needed." He sat back on the couch and looked at the fireplace. It was amazing. The stones were huge, very gothic. "Michael," Lilith moved closer to him, "you are so handsome. Do you think I am attractive?" Michael stood up. "Lilith, of course you're attractive. What kind of a question is that? But you know I am to be married soon. To Eve." Lilith sat back again. "Yes, I know. And I really do hate that. I think you should reconsider this. After all, I am more beautiful than Eve, and I have this wonderful world here. You and I would be great together, Michael." Then for a minute, both Michael and Lilith sat silently. "Michael, sweet, handsome Michael, you surely must have known after all these years. You know the way I've looked at you. I have looked at you for so long." Michael didn't say what he thought of at that moment. Everyone knew Lilith loved all men, but Michael was polite. "Lilith, I love Eve, and I will always love her." "No, Michael, don't you see? I want you. I must have you. We could be so great. I will make you my equal. You know I am a very strong woman. I can do anything I want. But you are the one I want to share this with. You are the only man that is my equal." "Lilith, I must go now. I have to go to Eve, and I'm sorry. I need to go." "No," Lilith screamed. She was in a rage. "You cannot leave me. I have desired thee." Lilith picked up the goblet of wine, and she threw it across the room. Lilith's black eyes turned green because her pupils were green. When she got angry, they grew large, and they encompassed her entire eye. Lilith ran toward Michael. She grabbed a hold of his robe and ripped it down the front. Michael didn't move. He stayed calm. He knew she was very strong, but he wasn't afraid of her. Michael sensed that Lilith would never hurt him. He knew she did love him, and he felt bad for her. She was a beautiful woman, and he was flattered after all, but Michael loved Eve more than any man ever loved a woman. Lilith pulled Michael's robe apart where she had ripped it now and exposed Michael's bare chest. She curled up her lip with desire and looked into his eyes. Lilith placed her long fingers on Michael's chest, and with her very long fingernails she softly scratched through the hair on Michael's chest. "I must have you, Michael. I insist." But Michael only stepped back from her and walked to the door. Lilith, still with her hand in the air as if Michael had not really left her touch, she was greatly hurt. Michael ran out through the door and quickly got into the ship. Michael left the large Jupiter moon and sailed like a slingshot through the darkness that glowed from the great orange swirls of Jupiter's rings. Wow, it was amazing, and he was definitely tired now. But he would navigate all night until he reached Earth. He needed Eve now. As he sped through the illumined darkness, he noticed behind him the faint glow of Lilith's ship following. Oh no, this was crazy. Lilith was going too far, but Michael did not stop. He raced away into the distance and seemingly darker blackness that existed between Jupiter and Mars. As Michael approached Earth, he noticed Lilith was turning away and was landing on the moon, which is the closest planetoid near Earth. And this he thought was very odd. What was she up to? Michael didn't know, but he did know he was almost there with Eve. Only a few more seconds and he would see the surface of Earth. As he entered the atmosphere of Earth, he was surprised to see the absolute beauty. The planet was very green. The vegetation must be awesome. Wow, the trees are so huge they reach to the sky. And the animals were huge. But Michael didn't even think about this great beauty, as he normally would. All he could think about was Eve. He was about to see his wonderful Eve. He loved her so much. His small ship was landing in a very strange place. It was a small open field, but it was only a small area. Around it was an awesome garden that even from this distance he could tell was exquisite. And he could see Eve at the landing pad. She was waiting for him. She looked nervous too, but she looked happy. As Michael got out of the ship, Eve went running to him. They embraced and kissed. They stood there for a long while holding each other. They held each other so long they didn't notice that Kron was standing there, waiting very patiently to talk to them both. "Sorry," said Michael. "It has been so long since I've seen Eve. I was lost in her touch." "I know," said Kron. "It's okay, really. I need to tell you both something now. You must listen carefully. The garden has all you will ever need. There is a home here, prepared for you. We have planted a variety of trees for food that will delight you. You must both prepare for the transition." So God created from the dust of the earth a body for Michael. It was a body from the elements of the planet Earth, made from the dust of the planet. And God proceeded to take half of the dust and make for the man, and the other half he made for the woman. And then this God said to Michael, "I will call you Adam." It means earthling. "And your wife shall be called Eve," and this means the mother. And then God spoke to Adam and gave him instructions. There are 12 varieties of trees that we have planted in the midst of the garden. Each variety was from a different section of the quadrant, one each for the original planets of the 12. These fruits will enlighten your mind and sustain your life, so long as you eat them, and so long as you do not wander from the garden. There is, however, another fruit which grows from the planet. If you go outside the garden and partake of this, you will die. This tree is only for the gods. It is not to be eaten by either of you. If you eat of this tree, you will die. Meanwhile, back on the tiny green moon of Saturn, at the command station, an assembly of the 7 was taking place. Kron had asked the 7 council members to meet one more time before Kron left for Polaris. At the assembly was Samael, god of Draco constellation, cherubic overlord. Draco had a great mega-city, And it was not far from the sun system. Samael had been watching closely the workings of Kron. Samael was a very interesting fellow. He had known Kron now for a long time. He was, after all, Kron's son. Samael was the most beautiful being in the Draco quadrant. There were none his equal in beauty. Samael had black, wavy hair. His face was strikingly handsome. He had huge wings with black feathers, great plumes that dazzled with effervescent green and blue. Samael also had horns like a bull on his head. His feet were those of a calf, and his tail was like a lion. Samael knew all about the Supreme Intergalactic Council's new project. He knew the real reason Kron and the members of the Supreme Galactic Council had stationed him here. He also knew of the great importance of the outpost Earth and the garden retreat they had built there. He was the great protector. Some may have thought Samael was jealous. After all, everyone knows of his love for Eve, how he had for so long admired her and had asked her to marry him. Eve had thought about his proposal seriously. She felt very flattered, but she was in love with Adam. She could not be with another. At the meeting of the council that day, Samael had been asking many questions. Had the council been sure to protect her? And had they sufficiently warned her of the eating of the wild fruits of the planet? Samael understood that the project here was necessary, that the entire thing had been done time and time again in other sun systems, and that the work was always done with the greatest care and earnestness of the Supreme Council of God in the Inner Nebula. He also knew that this work was not always easy, and there were never any assurances that the course would be easy or perfect. All the star systems were populated with free spirits who at all times had free will. He knew that the Supreme Council's first imperative was the non-interference of the free will, and it was the prime directive. Samael knew also the risks and all the goals of the project at hand. The galaxy was separated into quadrants. The galaxy was vast, and the 7 members of the Council, Saturn, Lilith, and the rest, had been very carefully chosen as the newly elected project managers of this exploratory mission. Here in this sun system, the inner regions of the galaxy were heavily populated by highly advanced beings that even the Polaris High Council did not fully understand. The outer part of the galaxy was the new frontier. The new stars that had formed only recently in galactic history were constantly being colonized by the Council. Earth was the newest colonizing project of the Supreme Council. Samael had a funny feeling. Something didn't seem right. Not with this latest project. Sure, he trusted the Supreme Council, also Kron, his father, but Samael also knew that some things were odd. Why had the Supreme Council chosen him to manage the new evolutionary project? And Michael and Eve were put on Earth. Everyone knew how much Samael loved Eve, and Samael also knew how those projects could go wrong. The Supreme Council knew about the risks, but they also were able to foresee almost every eventuality and always had backup plans. They also knew very well what precautions to take and who should be the people who would carry out the job they needed done. They knew exactly what they were doing. Samael would watch very carefully. Saturn approached Samael. "We must talk. It's about Lilith, your sister." "What?" Samael asked. "What has she done this time?" "She told me that you had been on the Jupiter station, that you wanted Michael to stop off on his way to Earth, and that you needed to speak with him." "Jupiter? I haven't been to Jupiter for some time." "Why would she say this?" Samael asked, surprised. "I don't know, Samael. I was hoping you would know. Kron has just come back from Earth. He has related to the Council that Lilith is up to something. She followed Michael on his way to Earth. Michael said she landed on the moon." "The moon?" Samael retorted. "What could she want there?" "Samael, that is just what I wanted to ask you. Everyone knows you're the closest to her. You know her mind and her intentions, and we need you to go there and find out what is happening." "Interesting," said Samael. "This is quite interesting. Okay, I will go directly in the morning." Back on Earth the next morning, Michael and Eve were exploring the new planet they had been posted to. It was really an unusual planet in that it was filled with some amazingly huge creatures and some very odd little creatures as well. But the planet was delightful. Eve had wandered off away from Michael. She had wondered about the outside world. The garden was a very wonderful place, but Eve was interested in the creatures outside the garden too. Eve had found a trail. It had been a path used by some creature. It led to a pond and some falls that bounded down from the high bluffs. Very beautiful. It was so peaceful. Eve was watching some little animals play on the grass near the bank of the pond. They were so cute, Eve thought. The animals were very similar to the animals on Polaris, but it never amazed her the variety of species that one could find on planets such as this. Just then, Eve heard something behind her. She was startled, and she looked up. It was Samael. Eve knew Samael very well. She had once even cared for him. She was surprised by his appearance here. "Why are you here, Samael? You were supposed to be in Zion. What are you doing here?" Samael just stood looking at her. He had a charming smile on his face. He seemed to be entranced with this vision. It had been a long time. "Eve, my Eve, you're so beautiful, just as I remembered. I have missed you so much, Eve." Eve seemed to be perplexed. "Samael, what are you doing here? You should not be here with me alone." Samael stopped his entrenched stare. Then he looked away from her, as though to let her know he was not here for any wrong reason or suspicious doings. "I'm here to warn you, Eve. I know you are with Michael. I know you are in love with him. But, Eve, I still care about you. I cannot help it if I am worried about you. I have come to show you something. There has come to my attention recently something of a grave concern to you, and not just you, Eve, Michael as well. You must listen. I know Michael won't listen to me. And this is why I've come to you. Eve, Kron told you not to eat from the fruit of the trees, that you would die. They were poison, right?" "Yes," Eve said, "this is true. We are not to touch the fruit, as it will kill us. And they are only for the gods." Samael gasped. "Eve, if the fruit is truly poison, why did God plant the tree in the middle of the garden with the other trees? You have already touched the trees and the fruits, and you did not die." "No," Eve said, "I have been very careful. I have avoided the fruit. I have only touched the ground and the vegetation." Kron said that the tree was planted in the midst of the garden for the gods. I assume it was when they visit us. They will have food here. Samael again sighed. "Eve, look at me. I am a god now, because I have eaten the fruit. I did not die. I only became God. The council has told you this, but they are wrong. You will not die, but the fruit will make you immortal. It will give you the knowledge of the new world. You will become one with my world and experience the joys that you cannot imagine. The council knows that you will eventually become a god, just like Kron, our father. But they have erred in their judgments. They believe that you can become God only through free will. They have chosen Michael's plan. He wants you to decide for yourself. I cannot leave your eternal soul up to chance, Eve. I love you too much, so I have come here today. You must partake of the tree. Follow my plan, O Eve. I will give you laws and judgments that if you will follow, it will lead to immortality. You'll become like God, knowing good and bad. The great eternal Father, he wants you to follow my plan. It's obvious that the tree was planted there for you. Isn't it apparent that the true God wants you to partake of it? Look, Eve, look at the fruit. It is so beautiful. Many of the fruits taste exquisite and are a delicacy I have never known before. But it is after you have eaten that it is important. After you eat from the fruit, you will be changed. You will be transformed into a god, as I am. You will not die. You will live as a queen, become as a goddess of this world. Eve, there is no other way to become like God. That is why the Supreme Council has placed you here, planted the tree of this world in the middle of the garden. That is why I am here, to give you the fruit, so you can join me and rule the entire system. We will be the gods of this world. No, Eve gasped. Kron told me we would die. My father would not deceive me. Why do you say such things? Eve, Cron knows that when you eat from the fruit, you will become like God. He knows, too, that you must eat from the fruit. But this eating must be a choice. And Cron could not tell you to eat this fruit because the fruit is something you must decide to do alone, without your father's helping you or swaying your decision. The Supreme Council knew that if Cron told you to eat the fruit, you would do it for his sake. They have sent me to explain this to you, as they know that if you are told the truth from me, you will not be compelled to eat it, for you do not love me as you do Adam and Cron. They also know that I love thee, and I will not deceive you. And you know that I will not deceive you. Eve thought about what Samael was saying. It was all apparently true. Eve herself knew that the mission they were on was mysterious. And she knew that the mission was a huge decision, must be made without anyone forcing them. It appeared that the fruit was pleasant to look upon. It was enticing to the mind to become a god. If it was poison, her father would not have placed this tree right in the middle of the garden. Also, they surely knew of Samael's journey here to earth. They could not have been unaware of his actions. And it surely had been the reason he was placed on the Draco High Council as the cherubic overlord. Eve reached up to the fruit and touched it. It was pleasant. She closed her eyes and she looked into the sky. Then she put her tongue on the fruit. It tasted sweet. It had no bitterness to it. That was it. She would eat of the fruit. She would eat and she would take all the consequences. So she did. And Eve went to sleep on the grass by the river. Eve woke up later. The sun disk had already gone down halfway to the horizon. She sat up and looked around at the surrounding area. Samael was still there. He had been watching her sleep. "Well, how do you feel?" said Samael. "I feel strange," she said. "I feel very odd. It's like I need something." "I know, Eve, I know. It is what I feel too." We feel the same now. Eve looked down at her body. She felt desire. She had never felt desire before. She looked away from Samael's body. "Look at me, Eve. Why won't you look at me?" "I can't," Eve said. "I feel ashamed of my thoughts. I need to find Adam. He must be worried about me." "Wait, Eve," Samael said. "You know I love you, and I have always loved you." Eve. Eve didn't say anything. She couldn't understand what was happening. Samael turned her around to face him, her head turned downward to the ground. He gently put his hand under her chin and brought her eyes to his own. "I love you, Eve. This was meant to be." "What is meant to be?" Eve said. "I don't understand." "Us," Samael said. "We were meant to be together. You and I will be married and become the gods of this world." But Eve stammered, "I'm to marry Michael. I don't love you. I love Michael." "But Eve," said Samael, "you are a goddess now. Michael is still human. He cannot be your husband now." "What? You tricked me." "Eve, if you will be a goddess, you will need me." "No, Samael, I will never leave Michael." And Eve ran away from Samael. Eve was running down the trail. She had been running and she didn't know why. She didn't even know where she was. The trail had led her far into the woodland. She had tears running down her face, too. She had never felt such great pain. She had never known such deep sadness. What had she done? She had done something she knew was completely wrong. What would Michael do? How would she tell this to him? Eve ran and ran. She wanted to be somewhere else. She wished she was dead. Even if she wasn't dead, after eating the tree, she could not see how she could face Adam now. She loved Michael so much. How did this happen? It should have been Michael that had eaten that fruit with her. It should have been Michael that had known these feelings with her. Eve fell to the ground and she cried herself to sleep. Finally, when Eve had woken again, she went back to the garden. She would have to tell Michael what had happened, even though she really didn't know what had happened either. But nevertheless, she would tell him she had eaten the fruit. She would convince him also to eat, and they would rule this world together. Eve found Michael at the far side of the garden. When he saw her, he was puzzled. She had a look of great fear on her face. "What's wrong?" Michael said. "Are you okay? I've been looking for you for so long. Why would you leave me like this?" "I'm sorry, my dear Michael. Something has happened. I need to explain." Michael and Eve sat down on the ground under a fig tree. The air smelled of grass and flowers. Michael was waiting patiently for Eve to explain. She looked very different. She was very nervous. Eve took a fig leaf and put it over her legs as she sat. Michael noticed this, and he thought it was strange. "Michael," she finally started, "I was out of the garden yesterday. I saw Samael there. Samael gave me the fruit of the forbidden tree." Michael turned his head toward Eve. "You ate from the fruits of the earth?" "Yes," said Eve. "See, I am not dead. It does not bring death, my love. Samael explained that it will make us like God, and it will give us knowledge." "Eve, Samael is wrong. What have you done?" "Oh, my Eve, what have you done, my precious Eve?" "Oh, Michael, I'm sorry. I have been greatly mistaken." Michael looked at Eve. He had a tear in his eyes. "My Eve, don't worry. I love you more than you know. I will do something. I will do something." Michael got up quickly. He jumped like a gazelle. He ran off into the garden, and Eve let him go. A few minutes later, he returned. He approached Eve. There were still tears in his eyes. "Eve, I know that you will die now, and I cannot bear this. To live without you, I, too, will partake of the fruit. I will die with you. And when Kron returns, he will tell us what will happen then." Michael walked over to Eve as she sat reclining upon a grassy knoll near the great river. "Why did you disobey God?" Michael said in a tone of voice which only showed concern, not blame. There was gentleness in his voice. He didn't ask her to complain or accuse her. He really wanted to understand her actions now. "Did you do this intentionally?" Michael said. Eve didn't answer right away. She sensed Michael's regret over her actions. She felt it too. Yet within her there was still a curiousness at what would transpire. Would something wonderful happen to them both now? Would they feel different? Eve wanted to feel different. She wanted to just feel. She had contemplated the idea of understanding the bitter experience of evil. If it was desperately taboo, she thought, there must be something different about it. Though Eve really couldn't begin to fathom the pain she had initiated her and Michael towards, she could not yet comprehend death, nor, for that matter, life itself. Was she really living? She had no experience to gauge existence by. She could not see that there was being and not being. Also, she had never felt the displeasure of bitter experience. She only knew boredom, just existence, and that wasn't enough for Eve. Eve wanted to understand life and why she was here. Eve was deceived into believing Samael. She did not want to disobey God. I wanted to know, to understand, Eve muttered. Samael told me that if I ate the fruit, I would begin to live immortally. He revealed my unfulfillment. But now my eyes are open, she continued. I have comprehended that I'm bored. What do you think will happen now? Eve said to Michael, nudging her chin forward slightly. She cocked her head curiously toward Michael to hear his reply. What will death be like, do you not wonder? I do not know, Michael said, and I don't want to know. I know nothing of boredom or death, he said impatiently. We had all that we needed here in the garden. We did not need more. We should not have sought after this forbidden knowledge. It was forbidden. I know, Eve said back quickly, but are you not curious? Don't you feel desire? Desire, Michael thought. I had no knowledge of desire before, and now that I do not think that I like it much. Before I was satisfied, now I think nothing satisfies me. But Eve struck back. Are you not satisfied with me? Before you did not know that I could satisfy your longing. Now you have felt my body next to yours, and I have seen you satisfied. No, Michael stopped. He could not tell Eve what he felt compelled to say. So Michael and Eve did partake of the forbidden fruit, and the eyes of their understanding, the woman, became opened. She began to perceive that they were unclad with the outer manifestation of density. So Eve began managing the material possessions of desire within the household of prudence. She invented various ornaments for herself to wear, that it might entice her husband more completely. And as if Michael might begin thinking that the beautiful presentation of her house was unacceptable, she came to develop great concern for the cleaning and the beautifying of it. Michael did not appreciate fully the knowledge of his nakedness at first, but as soon as Eve would come bringing him this knowledge, he would know. So Eve went gathering leaves of fresh knowledge from the trees of ideas, as she went sewing them together like patchworks of false ideas and notions. She soon became enwrapped altogether within the thoughts and aspirations of a lower nature. Thus, Eve having her eyes opened, she perceived that her sexuality should be used for her explicit advantage. Eve covered her loins and that of her husband's. In this way, she would entice Michael to wonder why that part of his body should be more secret than any other part of his body. By this method, she compelled Michael to give her children. Now a breeze came up that day in the garden. It was the inspiration of the Almighty. And Michael and Eve felt this subtle influence, but they did not recognize its love. Michael and Eve went hiding themselves deeper within their own thoughts and insipid assumptions, while still being fully aware of the past lives upon Orion and Polaris, and still dwelling in that plane of consciousness that the garden paradise had kept them in, away from the harsh elements of the outside world. Kron, the seraphic Supreme Lord, the messenger of the intergalactic Supreme Council, called out, "Michael, where art thou?" Not that Kron could not see Michael, but only to put that question to him, as if to say, "Michael, do you really know where you are?" Now Kron was of the high galactic order of the gods. He stood hovering above the face of the earth. When Michael had received the courage to speak, he forthwith excused himself. It was Eve. Kron seemed at first to accept that soundly, saying quickly to Eve, "What is it that you have done, Eve?" Eve replied, "It was Samael. He did deceive my reasoning, and therefore I ate." Just then a rushing sound could be heard, and an effulgence of power glowing like electrum, with flashes of lightning and thunder resounding. This was heard throughout the entire plain of Eden. The animals of the garden went running in panic, and the ground beneath the feet of Michael began to tremble and crack. Michael could hear a rumbling. The ground before him seemed to ripple, as if about to become undone from its foundations. A small fissure was beginning to show itself right in front of Michael's feet. As it opened, it separated the ground between Michael and the angelic presence. Eve clutched Michael's arm. Michael stood upright, without fear showing upon his expression. He knew with a perfect knowledge at that moment what tremendous wrong had been done. He knew that he had come too far to turn back. He would have to take his punishment with dignity. He would not beg. He embraced himself for the imminent doom he was about to suffer. At that moment, Samael, the slanderer, appeared from behind the black cloud masses. He walked out from the darkness and stood beneath a light ray that was now beaming down from a clandestine shining within the heavens. The enemy of Michael hung his head. He seemed to be trembling with great unrest. Reaching out his hand, he pointed towards the effulgent mass of light, and with a cry of thunderous sounding, he beckoned to the heavenly presence. "I am God. I shall sit upon the mountain of assembly. I shall make myself resemble the Most High. I shall sit in the temple dwelling in the intergalactic regions, and I shall change the times and the laws. You shall someday do an act of worship to me, Kron. Who art thou that I should call thee God?" But the voice from that great splendor that beamed down from the seraphim spoke then, "It is for this reason that I shall change thy ability to run to and fro between the heavens' council and earth. Ye shall not defile my courts with your insipid accusations, and down to Hades, the lowest regions, ye shall be brought, and not into my presence will you return. Now the feet of thy activity shall be taken from thee. Ye will go down within the elements of your own creation. Ye will dwell not with the gods in their assemblies, but you shall be cast out with the lower creatures of desire. There you shall wreathe and bemoan thy lot like an unclean reptile of the dirt, And those that see thee at that time shall stare in amazement at thee for thy ugliness. Your gaze shall be hideous. Your look shall be as a serpent with wings. Your dignity lost. Your horns of power shall be death and destruction. Now go with the enmity you have for Eve. She shall yet bring forth a seed to destroy thee. Because you have wounded her, she shall crush thy head. And to Eve he said, because you have eaten from the tree and I've told you not to eat, I'm going to make it difficult for you to bring children into this world. It shall be with great pain that you will bring forth the delivering one. It shall be with great pain that you will bring forth the delivering one. He will come after many ages and after great travail by your children. Though you were equal with Michael, your mate, you were not derived from something inferior, but you were his counterpart. Yet I shall make him now dominant over thee. And I shall make you have desire for him, so to bring forth children. He will dominate you until the seed should come from your belly. To Michael he said, the elements of production are cursed for thy sake. Ye shall have to work by the sweat of your face. Before you ate only the fruit of the garden from the trees that gave you life, 12 trees from each of the quadrants of the galaxy. And the garden gave you freely. You had not to toil. Now the garden will not produce but trouble and stings. With great suffering you will sustain your mortality. And you will provide for Eve the rest of your days until you return back again to the earth. Earth you are, and to earth you shall return, again and again and again, until you learn. After this, Kron gave to Michael and Eve mortal animal bodies, appropriate for their new world of wandering. Then Kron said, now that they have become as one of us, knowing both good and bad, peradventure that they were to actually take from the tree of life while in this condition, let us put them out from the garden. So the cherub creature Samael was stationed at the entrance of the garden to block the way to the tree of life. Though Samael could still enter the assembly on Zion, he remained now posted on earth, walking up and down in the earth, taking note of the situation on earth. Samael now only entered the assemblies to accuse and slander. His wrath from Michael was very great. The cherub blocked the entrance of the garden of paradise with a flaming sword. The sword of this law was sharp on both sides, and that one cannot live without the laws, nor can one live with them. And the law could not be passed by anyone except the one who would be able to wield the sword correctly. And Michael and Eve were made mortal, and the veil placed over their minds. They no longer could remember who they had been. Michael could not remember he was that great Michael. He now became Adam, the earthling. He did not remember his great position as the cherubic overlord anymore, nor did he know of the instructions and the mission to this tiny earth planet, nor of his great destiny with Mother Eve. Eve sat perched upon a log, her legs dangling down from the tree, which was half dead. She had never seen anything dead before. How does it feel to be dead? She wondered out loud. Adam was impervious to the whole dead tree dilemma. He was thinking upon more serious things now.